we're short of time, and there's lots of other speakers as well, and I'm grateful for that reception. It isn't, to be honest, I don't think it's a reception for me. I think it's a reception for everything that Diane and Jeremy and myself and our whole movement now stands for. I just quietly want to say a few things about where we go from here. And I haven't been able to be at the conference all day because I've been in constituency activities as well. And unless Asai mentioned the history that we went through in the late 70s and early 80s, and I think the key thing, I congratulate Paul and all the others who are involved in the Anti-Nazi League. But a while ago, I made a statement in a TV interview that then got repeated in the newspapers, and it was a conscious statement about the need for us now to come back together again to tackle the rise of racism and fascism in our society. And the reason I said that was on the basis of what Umesh said earlier. In the late 70s and 80s, the work of the Anti-Nazi League came at exactly the right time to confront racism and fascism that was developing in our society at the earliest stage. And I just pay tribute to all those that were involved at the time because they recognised the imminent threat that we faced. And to be honest, they were incredibly successful as a result of their creativity, their mobilisation, their commitment, and yes, absolute courage to prevent that threat emerging into a much more serious threat. And that more serious threat on some of the streets did occur because I was there when Blair Peach was killed in Southall. It was half a mile from my constituency. We were there that night when he was murdered. And we don't want to see any more murders or killings on our streets or anywhere else. And I think that's why a few months back I thought, well, there is an imminent threat now, we should recognise it. I just pulled off some figures very briefly, and I think we just need to wake up to the scale of the threat now. 500,000 people signed a petition calling for Tommy Robinson's release after he was jailed for contempt of thought. There were at least 15,000 that mobilised in Downing Street to protest against his jailing. Britain First has a following of 1.9 million on Facebook compared to just over 1 million for Labour on our Facebook. 3 out of the far-right activists with the biggest online reach in the world are British. 28 far-right sympathisers were arrested and or convicted of terrorist offences or violence offences during 2017. The police have now made it public that they've foiled since 2017 4 far-right criminal attacks, according to the London's Assistant Police Commissioner Mark Rowley. There was a 17% increase in recorded hate crime last year, almost 100,000. 40% increase in religiously motivated hate crime, with Muslims as 52% of the victims. There was a large rise in hate crime following the vote to leave in 2016, as we know. And the Football Lads Alliance secret Facebook group includes posts by members calling for Sadiq Khan to be hanged, Diane Abbott to be run over, and claiming Finsbury Park mosque attacker Darren Osborne was right to plot to kill Jeremy Corbyn. And the Jewish Community Security Trust figures show anti-Semitic incidents at an all-time high. 1,308 incidents last year, 34% increase. They're just some of the stats of what we're facing. And that's why today is so important. You'll put this in your diaries and your memoirs, because today is important because this is coming together, us recognising the scale of that threat and what we've got to do about it. We cannot allow this to grow within our society. Harold Lasky, who was the chair of the Labour Party after the Second World War, said fascism in this country won't come with some marching dictator in a uniform. It will come as a result of this sort of activity, this conservative authoritarianism, these individual attacks on individual civil liberties, the purveying of fear within our society, so people are frightened of standing up against these threats. And that's where we're at the moment. And we know why we're here. We know why we're here because every time there's a recession, capitalism goes into its periodic crisis, the opportunity arises for the right then to mask that crisis by blaming it on some minority that they'll attack, whether it's Jews, blacks, Asians, or whoever. And that's the traditional role of the right and the fascists within our society. So how do we confront it? Well, the capitalist crisis gives us the opportunity as well of explaining really why that crisis has occurred and what the real alternative to it is in socialist practice, the development of public ownership, the development of trade union rights, civil liberties, working class mobilisation. So just as this is a threat to us now, this is an opportunity for us as well to expose how capitalism in its crisis does bring about this right-wing fascist reaction on a regular basis, and that we can end that by traditional working class mobilisation. And in terms of three things. One is to make sure we explain to people what's happening so people are aware of the threat and understand the reasons for it. So all of us now have a responsibility in our daily lives, in our political interventions, in our social and cultural life to explain what's going on to people. The second, yes, it is to mobilise. We cannot allow the fascists to take over our streets. We cannot allow that to happen. So therefore, in our traditional way of peaceful, non-violent, direct action, yes, we've got to ensure there is no pass-around on our streets in this country for the fascists and the right. And thirdly, yes, let's learn the lessons of the anti-Nazi League, because one of the most effective ways of explaining what's happening, in mobilising and motivating people, was that cultural struggle that went on. The use of music, dance, literature, plays, drama, all of those aspects of our cultural life. So we hegemonised the whole debate, our societal debate, about what's happening within our society as a result of the capitalist crisis, but also as a result of this mobilisation of the right. So all of us now, I think, have a responsibility to do that. And I repeat, really, in conclusion, the message that's coming through in every discussion that has taken place in recent months. We cannot allow our movement anymore to remain sectarian or divided in any way. And that's why that's why it was important for Stand Up to Racism to organise today. That's why it's important, the work that Umesh and others are doing and bringing all the organisations together to sign up to a common statement of purpose for the future. And also, that's why I finish in a minute's time. That's why it's important that we have discipline as well, you're quite right. But that's why it is important now that every working class organisation that we're members of, we mobilise behind this cause. So after today, yes, in terms of the Labour Party, let me give you this commitment. The Labour Party can be and will be the largest anti-fascist and anti-racist movement in this country that we can. It will be the role of every Labour representative to be at the front of this campaign in every form we possibly can as well. But also, it's been mentioned, we need to go back to our trade unions now. Every trade union now needs to now mobilise on this basis as well. And every civil society organisation that we are members of or participate of as well, bringing them together. We're going now to launch the biggest anti-racist and anti-fascist organisation and movement that we've seen in decades in this country. Why? Because the threat is so great. But I tell you this now, and I'm not being sectarian, I think the most political advance that we can make is whenever that general election comes, and I say to the Tories, as we've all said, bring it on, because I want an anti-racist and anti-fascist in number 10 in the form of Jeremy Corbyn.